let's take a break from casting to do some welding on some castings. First of all, I'm not crying. I'm growing a lot of new varieties of heirloom peppers this year, and I stupidly decided to just grab one that looked ripe and take a big old bite of it. And it was really tasty for about 5 seconds, and now I can't feel my face, and I ran out of milk. So we're going to do some welding today, TIG welding to be exact, on some aluminum castings. I'll show you what I got set up and why I'm doing this. So I'm sure you'll remember this here sword. This is an aluminum sword that I made. It had some pinholes. This isn't the only kind of casting issue that I have. Here's a Kopesh that Greg left me. He used this. He cast this in one of his classes and ended up with a crack. You can see right there, a crack or multiple cracks. He says this happens if he overheats the metal. Cracks happen in castings, especially I think because cast aluminum and cast metals in general are kind of brittle, so they are prone to cracking, not necessarily bending. And lastly, I got this. This is one of the gingery lathe castings that I got from Chirpy, and it has a common casting problem that you can see right there. Some pretty bad porosity. A lot of my older castings have these problems as well. This is particularly bad, and these are things I'm hoping to be able to fix with a TIG welder. Now I know you're all going to ask, so before I get started, this is my TIG welder. Alpha TIG 200X AHP. It's this one. Does AC/DC, pulse, rock and roll, that kind of thing. It's got a lot of switches, some of which do things I don't understand. We're doing AC today. I think, yeah, that's right. I think 35-ish%, and other. I'm just not gonna mess with that because that's most of that's gibberish to me. Although I'm gonna crank this. It's a 110/220 welder. I'm using 220, straight argon, and aluminum filler rod, which is over in that pile over there, somewhere. Now before we get started, I want to say, I have never TIG welded cast aluminum before. I'm not that great at TIG welding. Of the very little welding experience I have, it's all been MIG, not all, but like 90% of it's been MIG welding mild steel. Most of that is sheet metal, or 1/8 inch, mostly sheet metal. That's probably about as far from TIG welding cast aluminum as you can get, so this might get real interesting, but just so you know, this is 100% possible with my setup, because a lot of people do it, but a lot of those people know what they're doing. So this is more of a test for me, personally. So there, covered all my incompetent bases. I'm going to start with this. This is just casting defects, some shrinkage that happened here. My hope is that I'll be able to get halfway competent at this with some practice on these castings here that aren't really critical. I just want them to look nice so I can use them as casting patterns in the future. And if I get decent at it, I'm going to use it on all of the gingery castings in the weeks to come, probably starting next week again on that, just to fix any problems I come across, maybe limit the amount of these that I'm going to have to recast because that's time consuming. And we'll go from there. Also, in future projects, the van project, I want to do a bunch of parts in cast aluminum and yada yada yada. But really upcoming is just the gingery lathe. But we're going to start with this sword that isn't as problematic. So from what I've seen, some of the major issues you have with cast aluminum are one, purity. So this isn't a very great. Any castings you do at home are not going to be commercial quality unless you're super good. That's why a lot of aluminum castings at home can't really be anodized well because you're going to have little specks of impurities. This, however, was not used in an engine. It was never soaked in oil, although I did use oil-bonded sand. You can still see some of it here because I was using this to dig out some patterns. This was also never in salt water. Never had exhaust or any of that crap, so I'm hoping it goes okay. It's still going to have a coating of aluminum oxide that you get on all aluminum, and hopefully we can break through that with the AC. I'm probably going to do most of this in voiceover because the welder is kind of freaking loud, so you won't be able to hear me scream as it inevitably burns my hand. I set it on this. This table sits up higher than my workbench, so that's why I'm using it. I'm going to set it on this big piece of steel to kind of hold it in place, also to hopefully stop the heat from this from getting too hot and burning my wood platform here. Don't know if that'll work. Ground clamp is going straight on the aluminum thing. It's pretty stable now. And fire up the welder. No, don't fire up the welder. Clean this first. Clean. Always clean. That's empty, huh? Here we go. That's the right way to dump acetone on something, right? So I still have more of those peppers that I pulled out. Oh, that hurts, the old cuts from work. So do I tell my wife they're spicy, or do I just say, hey look, new peppers, want to try? I'll probably warn her because my couch is not that comfortable. My dad, however, he's smart. He has a super comfortable couch. Now I know why. Actually, his spare bedroom's nicer than his real bedroom. Maybe he gets kicked out of bed a lot? I don't know. Acetone-soaked rag and acetone far away from the welding. Don't want to make that mistake again. Another tip I've heard, acetone wash off your filler rod too. Can never be too clean. There's already enough crap in the metal, I'm pretty sure. Don't want to introduce more crap unnecessarily. So I stuck an auto darkening mask over the camera, hoping that it would auto darken. I don't know why it didn't. I don't know, maybe my fat head was in the way of the sensor, or maybe it was on grind. Perhaps it's because I've never once changed the batteries in this thing. Maybe that fly flying around is getting in the way. I don't know. But basically what I'm doing here is I'm starting the arc. I'm kind of I'm not pushing the pedal down very far. I had it set around 180 amps, a lot of amps, and I just kind of modulated it with the pedal. So I started the arc and I just kind of moved it around the area, letting that AC action sort of clean up the surface. Occasionally you'll see a little spark or something. And then after I got kind of the area cleaned up, I would mash the pedal a bit harder, and as it started to melt, I would stick the filler rod in there. So I'd get some liquid metal there, and then I'd kind of spread it around. Sometimes it would kind of wet out, sometimes it would just bead up on the surface. But if it beaded up, I would just hit the pedal more and then move the torch around, kind of around the outside of the bead, and eventually it would flow in nice, and then I would stop. But I wouldn't just stop. So aluminum has a lot of shrinkage when it solidifies. So what I would do, I would release the pedal slowly as I circle the torch to the middle. So at the end, the last bit of molten aluminum there is right at the top part of the bead. I don't know if that's how you're supposed to do it with welding, but from casting, I tried to make sure that the high point is the last bit, because the last bit's going to shrink, at least in castings it does. Seems to work. Kind of boogery a bit. May have overfilled them, but overfilling is better than underfilling. Now I guess I'll break out the grinder and see if that worked. Now for grinding, I tried to keep the grinder moving forward and back. I wouldn't stop. I figured if I moved it forward and back kind of constantly, I would not dig a groove into anywhere. I would keep kind of the profile the way I wanted it. I just wouldn't stop in one spot. Always move forward and always kind of rock it back and forth, because I'm not grinding on a flat surface. This is a convex surface here. Sweet! Big sinkholes are gone. Now I just have little pock marks. I'm gonna break out the welder again. See if we can fix those. Can't forget a little more cleanup. I wonder if the little pit marks are because of that little last bit of shrinkage, maybe? I don't know, or maybe I didn't let the added filler rod kind of flow nicely. Not entirely certain, but it's way better than it started, I mean, that's for sure. To fix the little pit marks, I tried adding more filler than I thought was necessary, so instead of having like a filled in hole, I would end up with like a big mound or something, and then, grind it flat. At least that was my idea. If I'm wrong, please put in the comments the right way to do this. There, you know what? I'm pretty happy with that. I didn't get rid of all the little pin dot things, sinkholes, but I got rid of those big shrinkage marks. I think I'm happy with that. I'm going to call that good. Now what should I do? Crack? A crack seems a little out of my skill set. Wonder how this would work. Like there's a big sinkhole right there in the sand rammer, and just in a couple places. This is really thick, super thick, so that's going to cause problems with heat, right? I'm going to try it. Oh, it's too thick for the ground clamp. Now this is full of Petrobond, so cleaning is extra important. Try to dig the crud out of there. Just going to get that pinhole out, right there. So the sand rammer is a little bit different. So the hole was a pretty big pour, but it wasn't a sinkhole like the shrinkage problems were. This is also a lot thicker. This is like, it's over an inch thick. It's like 1.25 inches. So I used quite a bit more heat, but it's the same basic principle. I just let the cleaning action do its job for a little while, and I mashed the pedal, and as soon as I started to see liquid aluminum, I would add filler, and then kind of circle around the ball of added filler until it kind of flowed into the metal around it. Then, like before, I let off the pedal slowly as I circled the torch back to the center, the high point. So hopefully I didn't end up with a big shrinkage hole and deep down below the surface level. It seemed to work. I mean, I'm no expert, but it certainly is less of a hole in it afterwards. And I didn't grind a big divot in or anything to find the bottom of a hole. It actually did get rid of the hole. Cool. Yeah, you know what? That works. You can even see kind of like the little round spot there. Dead center where I use the filler rod. Now this filler rod I'm using is not the same alloy as cast aluminum. I don't know exactly which filler rod it is, but the exact type of filler rod is less of a problem than my lack of experience here, so it doesn't matter. It's aluminum. It's aluminum. Cast aluminum, though, which I made this out of, that's pretty high in silicon, so I'm assuming the filler rod, as it's not brittle, is not full of silicon. So there, cool. You can see the difference. You can see it. I'm not going to touch it because it's scalding hot, but cool. Well, that was a success. So there you go. A noob with a typical Chinese-built home TIG welder and very little experience can successfully repair some casting defects. I'll attempt the crack later at some point, and the big porosity problems as the gingery project progresses. Cool.